championship winning season, and that's because they opted in for Dallar's additional engineering and technical support package to go along with whatever they learned on their own, while Action Express Racing did not. And it took AXR roughly half the season to get up to speed, to learn all the ins and outs of the car on their own, and then they came on incredibly strong. They had a very, very powerful second half of the season, but Wayne Taylor Racing, with Dallar there in lockstep from the beginning, really eked out too big of an advantage during the first half of 2017 for that to be overcome. If Juncos, if JDC Miller / Gainsco opt into that Dallara package, I would say that they are going to be in much better stead and should be more competitive from the outset. From the first question, though, are there going to be too many Cadillacs and DPI for its own good? I don't know if I can find an angle where that fits, for me at least, Ed. I do have a commentary. I don't even know if it's not really a commentary. It's just an expression story that I started a couple weeks ago, and I'll try and get it done, posted before Petit Le Mans. But that's in referring to Cadillac's DPI VR, Graham, as the final thing we've been asking for, or I should say finally what I've been asking for so long, and that is the modern equivalent of the Porsche 962. Would a manufacturer make a readily available, customer purchasable, race-winning capable prototype? Would they actually make that happen? And there's been a fair amount of back and forth written about this. I love reading some of racers' comments about this topic. Cadillac said at the outset of 2017 to one reporter that, no, we are definitely open to customer cars, and you name it. And look, it's their freedom to say whatever they choose. When you go and speak with the folks who've spoken with them, who wanted to gain access to those cars and who are told, no, it ain't happening, you have a disconnect in words. Basically, you have platitudes being offered. You have things being said that on the surface look great, Graham, but are not being met with reality behind the scenes. Similar situation coming into this season in 2018. Oh yeah, you bet. You bet. And no. A lot of those teams that wanted to buy Cadillac have been or were running Ligiers, Orecas, you name it, and taking nothing away from the spec P2 constructors. If Cadillacs were available, or Mazdas, or the Nissans, or even the Acuras were available for purchase this season, I'm fairly confident in saying every single P2 entrant this year would be in a DPI. Most of the teams that have bought the WEC P2s have told me they had the funds to be able to buy a Cadillac. Not inexpensive, but they were capable of doing it. For whatever reason, despite public statements that you bet, come on up, would love to sell it to you, sure as heck didn't happen. Those folks who were intent on coming in did so by having to buy WEC P2s. After 2 years, though, something has changed. And that is what I love. That is what I think is just phenomenal for IMSA and their DPI category. Granted, Acura still isn't going to sell their ARX-05, Graham. I believe there is a minimum 2-year. I've heard it might be 3, but at least minimum 2-year exclusive with Team Penske. Mazda has said in no uncertain terms they are not ready to sell their RT24Ps for at least another season, so they'll compete through 2019, at least as a pure factory team, no customer cars. Have had a change, though, with the Nissan on-road DPI. Scott Sharp telling us, Ligier also stating in press announcements that, hey, if you want one, the 2-year exclusivity is now up, is not been renewed with ESM. Come and get them. So I hope that while most of what we've read so far, Ed, is there will be as many as 7 Cadillac DPI VRs on the grid at some races next year. I'm hoping that we hear, no matter what's going on with ESM and trying to replace Tequila Patron as their primary sponsor and whatever their car count ends up being, I hope we hear of at least one additional Nissan let's just say non-ESM Nissan DPI being fielded by someone, because then it would not be simply growth within the Cadillac family, but also with Nissan. And that, to me, tell me if you agree, Graham, that might actually be the best indicator of health in the DPI ranks. That instead of everybody going to the championship-winning, defending champion model, we have some folks actually looking into one of the other models. That's Juan Sebring this year, Juan Laguna Seca, last year Juan Petit Le Mans, another chassis that has done a fair amount, I guess the second most successful DPI chassis since the Formula launched.
I completely agree, and it is it's that magic moment, isn't it, when you can find a formula that is not only competitive, but is accessible in terms of the finances that apply to it. And we know, and actually the final question, and I think actually I'll say this before we read it, it's expressed in one of the more intelligent ways I've seen this debate expressed, is looking to investigate exactly why we've got that division here between the DPI formula and car, the new LMP1 hypercar idea. And there's a couple of perfectly sane and simple reasons behind that. But yeah, if you can get to the stage where you've got this opportunity for, you expressed it perfectly, a 21st century Porsche 962, and in particular, if you've got the opportunity for choice in that marketplace, because one of the weaknesses that we tend to forget now with our rose-colored spectacles, certainly in the European and global product, was there probably were just a few too many of those Porsches against not many of much else. And if actually you could get to the stage where there was, a goodly number of Cadillacs, but I think you described it perfectly as a 21st century Porsche 962. But what would be even better, MP, is if it wasn't just a Porsche 962. If, as well as that, we had a Jaguar XJR12 in the manner of a DPI Nissan and something else. If actually what you got was a depth of numbers, that depth of numbers, by the way, doesn't need to be much more than 3. That I think would be something truly spectacular.
Completely agree. Mate, why don't you take our final question for the Week in Sports Cars, presented by Cooper Tires, recorded here on a fine September 25th.
It comes from Keith Gibson. Is the IMSA DPI idea too cheap for the WEC? If manufacturers could buy a chassis, drop an engine in, do aero to look like a production theme for a fraction of the cost of an LMP1 and GT Pro, would the WEC become too unbalanced towards prototypes and manufacturers move away from GT cars? Do the WEC need to price out the smaller manufacturers in order to keep the GT fields healthy? That's a healthily different way of looking at it. Let me, just really
Great
briefly.
Question, Keith. Great.
It is a really good question. Why is it that we've got this division? Why is it that the WEC is going down a road that doesn't accord with what a lot of people regard as being a truly sensible way forward with DPI? First things first, you need to look at recent history. The WEC and the ACO would say that they believe they've been caught out by going too far down one road on the technology front and not having direct relevance to the product of their main manufacturer customers. That's why the styling Q aspect comes in with the hypercar formula. It's also why they want to retain the hybrid aspect to the technology. They need that electrification aspect, they believe, in order to be truly relevant in the modern marketplace. The second part of it is to do with this business around budget. There is massive concentration going on at the moment to drive down the potential upper level of the new LMP1 formula, and for two reasons. One is because, of course, it expands the potential number of manufacturers that will come, because obviously you're not just looking to convert the likes of Toyota, you're looking to get people onto the wagon of endurance racing, some of them potentially for the first time, and certainly some for the first time in a long period of time. The second thing, and this is equally important in a cold and cynical world, is you want these organizations to be sufficiently committed to these programs that they are prepared and empowered to to activate those programs. What that means, marketing terminology, is that you're spending money to advertise, to publicize. That means you're spending money trackside, you're spending money on gantries, you're spending money on TV ads, you're spending money in the paddock, you're spending money that is actually helping to keep the business of racing, and in this case, the business of the WEC, the ACO, the Le Mans 24 Hours, in the case of DPI with IMSA, keeping that ball rolling. What they're trying to do is to put together a package that is sustainable over a longer period of time than the current program has been. And what that means is you're looking to put in a formula where there's limited scope for development, which means limited escalation in terms of cost, which also means you get more than one shot at this. What do I mean by that? At the moment, the huge pressure is time. The clock is ticking to the point at Silverstone in September 2020 when these cars are due to race for the first time. That is not a lot of time to go. It feels a bit like a kind of endurance racing Brexit, to be honest with you. Anybody listening in from the UK will know exactly what I'm talking about with that one. So the time constraint is the key. And were we in a position where we're talking about launching LMP1H, it would be disastrous if people miss that starting gun. With a formula that actually allows people to have something with a little less development potential, that's got a couple more corners around it, actually, it's not the end of the world if, for the sake of arguing, you've got 4 manufacturers interested and 3 of them make the deadline and the 4th doesn't, because it shouldn't be as difficult as it has been before to get on that moving platform a year late. That's the upside. The downside is launching anything new into a cold and cynical marketplace is always a risk. DPI has worked. Thus far, it has worked. There's no doubt about that. It's not what the ACO wanted. They have actually, if you listen to them, some reasonably good reasons for saying so. They want to be in control of their own destiny in exactly the same way as IMSA want to be in control of theirs. Unfortunately, they are mutually exclusive aims and objectives there. If you ask Gerard Deveau, if you ask Pierre Fillon, if you ask any of the guys involved in the organisation of the WEC, they will say, point me in the direction of a current or aspirant DPI manufacturer that wants to come and do the WEC, not the Le Mans 24 Hours, the WEC. And that, whether you like it or not, from the point of view of their commercial interest, is the correct point to be making. It may not be the point you want to hear. It may be that you might be in the camp that says the WEC is something that could be sacrificed at the altar of getting it right in terms of the Le Mans 24 Hours. They're the guys in charge. They're the guys who have to justify it. That's their point. And it is a telling point. And it's absolutely no different whatsoever than the point that was made by IMSA in bringing forward DPI in the first place. It's worked for their product.
Keith, I'll just add one bit to this, and it's coming off of your brilliant opening sentence in the question, is the IMSA DPI idea too cheap for the WEC? That landed with me in a certain way where I think it describes differing business models for the two sanctioning bodies. If we think of IMSA, and we also think of the WEC/ACO, both rely on investments from all manufacturers to make their series work. With IMSA being a domestic series, no international travel, the asking prices for official manufacturer affiliation, that's required for any, whether it's GTs to prototypes, the auto manufacturer associated must spend money. Again, we've heard rough numbers that it's in the $1 million range per year. It might not be a straight check that's written for that amount. Some of it could be a portion for marketing activation, but every manufacturer must commit. And there's some exceptions where the Nissan thing, for example, with ESM, Nissan is not a true manufacturer. The team has facilitated this, so they've come up with a workaround on that. But if we think of what IMSA needs per year to cover travel and cover this and that, a lot of it, I don't want to say all, because there's obviously entry fees from the teams, et cetera, but